שלום לכם וברוכים הבאים לתוכנית מיוחדת של ערוץ שובר חומות. כאן עידן מאראש. ניתן לצפות בתוכנית המלאות בערוץ היוטיוב הרשמי של הערוץ, ולהאזין לתוכנית המלאות גם באפל פודקאסט, באייפונים ובאייפדים שלכם. והערב יש לי הכבוד לארח בשידור חי מארצות הברית, לראיון בלעדי וראשון לתקשורת הישראלית, את קולונל קירק לורנס, לשעבר מפקד כוחות ההגנה האווירית של הפיקוד האירופי ומפקד כוח המשימה לשיתוף פעולה עם ישראל בתחום ההגנה האווירית בצבא ארצות הברית. עכשיו אני אעבור לאנגלית והראיון יתבצע באנגלית. Hello, Kirk Lawrence. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you for having me, Don.
So first of all, I will tell you that it's a big honor for me to speak with you, and it is your first interview, if I think correctly, to the Israeli media, so I am very honored to host you.
Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate the invitation.
Let's start, if you don't mind. Could you please tell us about your military career in the U.S. Armed Forces and share with us the moment in which you decided to continue in this path?
Sure. I graduated from the U.S. Military Academy at West Point in 1981 and was commissioned as a lieutenant in the Air Defense Artillery in the branch of the Army upon completion of college. And I did not know at that time, of course, if I was going to make the Army a career. I was young and did not know quite yet what the future held in front of me, but I started my career in the 82nd Airborne Division as a paratrooper. And that experience shaped my desire to serve and to continue to serve beyond my initial 5-year commitment. I ended up serving a 30-year career. I served mostly in heavy divisions, the 4th Infantry Division, 1st Cavalry Division. I also did some air-based SHORAD defense in Germany. And then my last operational assignment was as the commander of the 69th Air Defense Artillery Brigade in Germany, which had the mission to support Israel in the joint defense of Tel Aviv. When I took command of the unit, I was told that this was the most important mission that we would have during my time in command. And that certainly turned out to be true. The experience, I had come into command as we were shifting the focus from Iraq into the Iranian and Syrian threat. And we were involved in the defense design to counter ballistic missiles from both of those potential areas. That was the focus of my time, culminated with, I participated as the ground forces commander with Juniper Cobra in 2005. The relationships that we built together with my Israeli counterparts, particularly Doron Gavish, who was my counterpart as the commander of he was a colonel at the time before he went on to do great things in your Air Force. Doron and I forged a bond that to this day, he is one of my dearest friends, and I consider him a brother because of what we did together during our time. I would also share, because I really think this is important, and even though my time in the military has been completed for some time, the relevance of what you all are dealing with in missile defense it spans generations. And when I first met with the commander there, who was General Baton at the time, I told him that the mission that we had been given was important to me clearly from a professional standpoint, but also from a very personal standpoint, because the seeds of my faith were sown in your land, and to have the responsibility to protect not only the nation, but the people of Israel, where my faith took root as a Christian, was incredibly significant to me personally, and it made the mission even more important from my perspective. And that was something that I believed then and I believe now, and it was a tremendous experience while I had the opportunity to do it. And we've stayed in touch over the years with the friends that I have made. We recently visited 3 years ago. We came back for 2 weeks with my family, and had the opportunity to spend some time back there as well. So I retired in 2011 as a colonel, and now I work in leadership development at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill.
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank Doron Gavish for helping us to make this opportunity, to make this interview, because he has the contact with you, and I thank him for helping me to make this opportunity. So it was important for me to say, with your permission.
Sure.
Share with me, please, special events or moments that you remember from your service, also here and also generally after 30 years in service. A couple of moments or events that you remember.
Well, particularly with my time being introduced to Israel and with the mission that we had, you know, a lot of us, we have perceptions that are shaped by the media, by other outlets. You don't really gain a true understanding of the complexity of your region and your country and what you're surrounded with until you have the opportunity to get on the ground and meet the people and understand just how significant the threat to Israel is on a day-to-day basis. I mean, you cannot understand it unless you've been there. And whenever I have conversations now with colleagues, either from my time in service or particularly here in a university setting, and I tell people there are narratives and there are facts. And it is very easy to let narratives drive your beliefs without understanding the facts. And what I tell them when they are having sometimes very lively discussions with me about Israel, I tell them you cannot truly understand the significance of the threat that exists to Israel unless you have positioned Patriot missile batteries in Tel Aviv schoolyards. That, to me, was the most significant eye-opening experience that I had, defending innocent population from the threat of a tyrannical dictatorship that wanted to destroy your country and your people. And that has not gone away. And I think that what your missile defense forces have done both in the recent events going back to when I served is incredible. And I think that the partnership that existed between our services was really critical. I can't emphasize that enough. For me, that was the most important takeaway. And so my experience was based around that. The other thing I would share is that it was an experience for my family that shaped us, because when I came on board in 2003, Israel was in the middle of the second Intifada, and if I am not mistaken, that was around the time that the nation was beginning to build its security fence and apparatus. There were, I believe it was up to 45 suicide bombers a day were being caught trying to transfer over the border. Tel Aviv at night which, you know, as Tel Aviv is such a vibrant city, Tel Aviv was dark. You know, there were very few restaurants open. People weren't out on the streets. It was a very serious time. And we got to see Tel Aviv come back to life over time as the security improved. But when I would come down for conferences, I brought my family with me as well. And my friends would go, wait a minute, why are you taking your family to Israel? It's pretty dangerous down there right now. And I said, you know what? We don't feel that way. This is important for my two sons and my wife to experience. They were embraced by Doron and his people on his staff, and it shaped their experience and their understanding of Israel as well. So both from a military standpoint and from a family standpoint, those are the two big takeaways that I would share.
And let me ask you one more question on
Certainly.
this field of your experience here in Israel. When you saw you were here during the Intifada, you told me. What was your feelings? Yes, what was your feelings when you see that the Israeli people is under threat, like this tough threat from the Palestinian people and Gaza? How did you feel? Tell me about your feelings a little bit.
Well, that's complicated, clearly. What I felt was that the true facts of the situation were not being discussed in the media at the time. I'm not a political expert, so I can't get into that. I think that at the end of the day, there are factions on both sides that would really like to have peace. But unfortunately, there are elements that will never commit to that. I think Golda Meir summed it up the best when she was asked when there would be peace. And she said, you know, when the Arab mothers love their children more than they hate the Jews. And I think that is an aspiration that I would love to see happen. I don't know how that will happen. I can't comment on it. But that perspective was certainly something that I picked up when I was there. But, you know, at the same time, there were communities where you had Arabs and you have Arab Israeli citizens that have far more rights living in Israel than they do in the other areas. And so I got to see that. I got to visit villages where people lived side by side, and it worked. So you know that it can work aspirationally, but unfortunately, politics gets in the way of the people sometimes.
Let's talk a little bit about the Iranian threat. In your view, what are the challenges now regarding to the Iranian threat from a strategic military point of view?
Well, I think clearly the big elephant in the room is a nuclear capability. It's one thing to have ballistic missiles. It's another thing to be able to launch nuclear-equipped ballistic missiles. That's a game changer for the entire region. I think that that anything that leads to that is potentially disastrous, not only for Israel, but for the other countries in the area as well. A nuclear-equipped Iran is probably one of the most dangerous things that could happen there. I think so strategically, that's the biggest impact and threat in the near term and long term.
Okay, and after your answer on this, let me open this field a little bit more and ask you do you think that there is a possibility of an Iranian missile attack in the near future, and what extent of the what is the extent of the cooperation between Israel and the US, mainly in the area of missile defense. So,
well, I don't know the probability of something like that happening. I think that it is a possibility, especially with the current.
I'm talking one moment. Sorry, I'm talking about the possibility. I'm not talking about something else.
Okay. Well, okay. I think, and I'm not an expert, but my feeling is that if they become nuclear capability, if they become nuclear capable, then there is a significant possibility that they would exploit that. As for cooperation between, the U.S. and the Israelis, I mean, we have plans in place to continue with that. Administrations, as you know, politics is a strange thing.
Yeah.
And every administration, has different views. So, while I would hope that the bonds stay strong to support in the area, I mean, it just really depends on the politicians at that point. But I know that from a military standpoint, there are very strong bonds, but we, of course, in the military, or when I was in the military, you were governed by the politicians. So I would hope that the cooperation would be as strong today as it was when I had the opportunity to participate in the process.
But you think that, if I understand correctly, if Iran will be capable to receive their goals, you see the possibility of Iranian missile attack?
Well, I think given if their actions match their words, and there's no reason to believe that they wouldn't, either in the near term and the long term, I think that it would be a real possibility.
Let's talk a little bit, if you don't mind, about the Ukrainian Russian war. And I want to ask you, first of all, what is your take on the Russian-Ukrainian war and its implementation on the Middle East? So talk with me first of all about your take about this war, and then about implementation.
Well, I think my first thought is it's tragic. And as history repeats itself, my first initial thought was, have we gone back to 1938 with what happened in Europe at that point? I think, at least if the reports are to be believed on the ground, that President Putin has vastly miscalculated the will of the Ukrainians to resist and to fight bravely and heroically for their freedom. I think all of us that are historians of the Russians, that used to be the Soviets, that the level of incompetence that is taking place in their operation, perhaps because of overconfidence, is very, very surprising. It just boggles my mind to look at what's happening. And I'm very proud of the Ukrainians and what they're doing. I think the big unknown and I'm not sure how it would relate to the Middle East. And I mean, there is a potential Russian-Iranian link that I'm not well versed in, but there are connections there. I think that the big game changer for everyone is the understanding of the way that drones are being used as a defensive mechanism now by the Ukrainians, and the introduction of hypersonics by the Russians should make everyone kind of sit up and take note of the potential there, because that bleeds in to challenges in missile defense. You know, when I was doing what I was doing, we were concerned with ballistic missiles, and cruise missiles were a beginning of the discussion. But we've moved beyond introducing the threat of cruise missiles. Now it's not only do you have armed drones, unmanned aerial platforms, now you have the potential of drone swarms. You have the introduction of rockets, which the Israelis have countered so efficiently with Iron Dome in your area. But now what does hypersonics do to it? How do you counter hypersonics, and what do you develop? And it's my belief and hope that the defense industries have been looking at this for some time and understanding the potential of the threat and how to counter it. And then when you have now multiple threats, is how do you integrate the command and control of it? So there are some challenges here for the future.
So let's return a little bit to the region of Israel and the Middle East, and let me ask you, please, what do you see as the future challenges in the field of air defense here?
Well, I think we touched on it a little bit there. The continually evolving threat in air and missile defense that's been going on for years, which I just mentioned about the introduction of hypersonics. You know, that gets into a whole other area of how you have to be able to shoot something down. You have to be able to see it.
Yeah.
So how do you develop sensor platforms that have the ability to pick up and track something moving that fast? I'm not confident that anything ground-based can do it. You may be looking at the introduction of satellite-based technologies to do that. I don't know where industry is with that. I do know that Northrop Grumman is looking at some of that. I would assume that your industry is doing that as well. But that's the next big challenge, I think, is because now you can have hypersonic cruise missiles as well. So that just changes the entire dynamic. The introduction of drone swarms, the complete evolving threat, and the challenge of tying it all together in an integrated command and control area so that you're shooting at the right target at the right time and deconflicting all of that, it's going to be very, very challenging.
You're talking only about the field of the area of Israel, or generally?
I think both. I mean, Israel has become a leader in missile defense technologies. And I know that there's been some American industry cooperation with that in partnership to help make that happen. But what the Israelis have done, if you look at where the Israelis were 20 years ago, when Arrow was just being introduced, Iron Dome was maybe a drawing, to where you have come now with the introduction of the improvements in those systems and the cooperation with the US and with Patriot and THAAD. All is very, it's incredible what Israel has done. But let's be clear, it's been definitely out of necessity, and which I think has driven the results.
Yeah. So let me return with you, if you don't mind, to your time here in Israel, as a commander here in Israel, and ask you to, could you please tell us about the distinguishing features you observed while working with Israeli commanders and soldiers?
Sure. So clearly there are cultural differences between those of us in the West and Israel. I mean, we understand, but the similarities are far more numerous than the differences. What impressed me the most about my colleagues in the Israeli military, in both the IDF and in general and the Israeli Air Force, was their total focus and commitment to getting the mission done. And the integrity and honesty with which we dealt with each other. I mean, let's be real. Every government, every military, they're going to come into things with agendas, different ways of looking at things.
Absolutely.
That's normal, and you have to recognize that up front. And maybe it was unique with just myself and Daron. I would like to believe that other commanders working together would be able to forge the bond that we did when we had conflicts. And these are not personal conflicts, but professional conflicts from the standpoint of just different views, of what we were going to do. He and I could step outside and one-on-one be very honest, very transparent. In hindsight, we probably had conversations that we weren't supposed to have, but we always found a way to work through it, to find a solution so that we could work together. And I found that to be true of his entire staff. And my staff at the time had the same experience there. Just the professionalism, the honesty, the transparency to work together towards a common goal was just incredible. And I have rarely seen anything like that.
So let me ask you one more question on this. It is connected to the question you just answered, but a little bit from another point of view. What can you tell us about the two militaries' mutual learning, and how do you think it influenced both armies' professional development? I mean, tell me first about the mutual learning in your time, and how do you think this mutual learning influence the professional development of the two armies until this day?
I'd have to give that some thought. I don't know if I can give you a good answer about how it's influenced us leading up to today. But I do know that we learned so much from each other about how we did business. Let's just break it down to the language barriers. Yeah. We did something at the time that we had to really go through some hoops to get permission to do, but we put Israeli crew members inside our Patriot command and control modules. And we did that, and there was a lot of pushback on the American side to do that. I mean, we had to really go through some challenges to get that approved. But we did it because we wanted to make sure that we had someone in our In our C2 command and control node that was in contact with an Israeli command and control node so that we could make sure that we were deconflicting targets and that we were working together to not screw things up. Because, well, just for example, the Israeli word for yes is kin.
Yeah.
You know? And so when you hear someone on the radio and they're speaking in Hebrew and you think that they're speaking in English, and you're asking a question and they're going kin, but you can't, you know, the level of understanding just for a simple word. So we put operators inside that could help deconflict that, and we learned a lot from that. It was efficient, it worked, but the resistance to putting someone inside, you know, another foreign national inside the command and control mechanism, you know, where the launches were going to take place, was significant. And so we really had to make the argument, look, these are our allies. If we can't trust each other here,
Absolutely.
then why are we here?
I agree.
And that argument prevailed, you know, and it wasn't like there were any, I mean, Israel had Patriot missile systems too. It's not like they hadn't seen the inside of these things before. And so we tried to let common sense drive the day, and Daron was really good at helping us work through that. And you know, we had to take this up through a number of layers of general officers to do this, but that's just one example. And we became better at command and control and target deconfliction because of it. So that's a small example of that.
Do you have one more example that you want to share with us?
I think the understanding of how the different staff processes worked.
Okay.
The staff in the U.S. military, the staff process is very formalized, and so you will brief your courses of action.
Yeah. And
then the leader will make a decision, and that's the course of action that goes forward. And then we'll get to the next level, and whoever gets briefed will ask questions, but that's the only course of action that goes forward. It's very formal, it's very structured and all that. When I went to my first staff briefing, the senior officer got the briefing. He got the recommended course of action.
Yeah.
And then he turned around to everyone else in the room and said, well, what do you think? And everyone who didn't get their course of action approved then jumped in and they re-argued the entire process again. That was very different from anything I had been used to. But it was also valuable because sometimes you can become focused on a solution and then you get narrow-minded about that solution. So it was certainly an eye-opener, but there were some really good takeaways from that too. That you have to always be open-minded about the way forward. And
what do you think? What's the right way to take decisions? The USA system or the Israeli one?
I think the right way to do it, I think there's benefit in both processes. I think that you have to have a leader who is willing to ask questions of the solution that's provided. That you have to have leaders who just aren't going to accept what they're given, that you have to constantly have the intellectual curiosity to push back and to ask those questions. My preference, and culturally, I like the formalized process, but I like seeing it work best when you have a leader who knows enough to ask the right questions to uncover the things that might not have been briefed.
Yeah. I understand. Let me ask you one more question for a final note.
Sure.
On a final note, what would you say to the Israeli people who watching this, who will watch this interview? And I think it will be a lot. What would you say to the Israeli people concerning the military ties between Israel and the United States?
Well, what I would say is that regardless of the political aspects of any of this, you have a lot of friends over here. Those of us who have served with you have been shaped by that experience in ways that are so difficult to explain. I know that the units that are still stationed in Germany, now it's an Army Air and Missile Defense Command that is there, still has the responsibility to support. And I am assuming that those relationships are being built every year and growing stronger and stronger every day. Whether people want to admit it or not, as I said, there are narratives and there are facts. Israel remains the only legitimate democratic form of government in the Middle East. That in itself bonds our nations. There are more similarities than differences. And I think from a military support standpoint, as long as our leaders continue to understand that, I think the support will always be strong.
So I wanna thank you very much for this conversation. It was a big honor for me to speak with you and to talk to you, Mr. Kirk Lawrence. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you. I mean, I'm to the point in my life where I'm an old soldier now, but I told my friend Daron that my time in uniform ended some time ago, but I would have no hesitation suiting back up and supporting you in any challenge that you have over there. It means that much to me personally because we have such close ties and such close friendships with the folks that we work with. So thank you, Idan, for asking me to do this. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
And I hope that we get to meet in person sometime. I hope to come back over.
I can tell you one thing. When you come over, I would like to meet you personally.
Nothing would make me happier.
And we will keep in touch after this.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And shalom.
שלום לכולם. Thank you. תודה רבה.